I think most of us are jealous. I think most of us are jealous that he can actually do that. He's got the hair to do it. So.
No, well, you say that, Ed. I mean, it might have been. It's sorry. I have actually just been on that treadmill behind me, so it's a nice sweaty whale. But anyway, there's a thought.
Probably not. You're lying now.
No, I haven't had a shower. I'm not going to be that repulsive. Guys, how long have you got, by the way? Ed, did you say you've got how long?
About 10 minutes.
Well, I've got a.
I've got so much stuff to do.
Yeah. So basically, what you're doing that classic politician thing on Newsnight, where I've just got to get through 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That's all I need.
As long as you like whaling.
I'm supposed to be doing a panel thing for you know who at 10:30. So
the best in class company.
Yes, exactly.
Good. Okay, well, no worries. Well, you just jump off whenever you want. Whenever you're bored or taking questions you don't like, just close it down. Where's he gone?
I don't know.
I don't think his things are working.
Oh my God, his agent's giving all over again. He's abandoned me.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Anyway, we are live, so I don't know where he's buggered off to. So, Peter Rawlings, We are live. Yes, exactly right. Oh, he's back in again. He doesn't know what's going on.
Terrible technical issues. Am I all frozen?
You're just doing that room thing.
No, unfortunately, you're not.
Okay, that's good.
So we were just talking off. Clearly, you two have got a bit of an admission to make. You're clearly have been seeing hairdressers, haven't you? The pair of you. You in this lockdown period, you're particularly well coiffured, the pair of you.
Me?
Yeah,
it's link to this.
It's better than this.
No,
that wouldn't be hard though, would it?
My hairdresser is called Edward. It's my stepson, with a pair of shears set on number 2. So.
That's right.
Well, I'm grateful that we've got a surviving member of the Rolling Stones joining us today, down there in that box with that crazy hair. Ed, yours is not what I'd call rock and roll. Simon, reveal the rock and roll. Show them.
That's how you do it. Look at it. That's full now. Pat Butcher, bit of pink.
What? Say to that.
July the 3rd, that's when they're out, isn't it? I've got that in my diary, even ahead of pubs, which are allegedly now on the 22nd of June, aren't they? So that's a very happy time for me. But thank you for joining us, gents. Obviously, we are joined with royalty. I actually have a crown ready to wear for you here as a state agency royalty. But this will surprise you, Peter and Ed. I couldn't be bothered actually putting it together because there was a little bit of work involved, so I thought, sod it. So anyway, but you two obviously famous rivals in central London, both Douglas and Mead.
He wishes.
You wish, yeah. Douglas and Gordon. And Peter, obviously, first of all, Foxtons and then Marsh and Parsons. So I'm going to ask the pair of you, and let's start with you, Ed. What was he like as a competitor?
Well, it was a very different period back then. We're talking back in the 90s, and both the offices of Douglas and Gordon and Foxtons covered huge areas in those days. Foxtons didn't have an office in Chelsea, so they had basically we were both covering very large areas, and it was fantastic. I mean, it was a really exciting time. Peter clearly was trying to sort of push the boundaries of what was considered not only normal but also decent, and decided, and so we had to react accordingly, and it was just really good fun. It was actually, just to give you some idea. I mean, at that stage, Peter and I were still having lunch together about once a month to talk about what was happening.
Yeah,
and it was just to he did. You see, there you go. He won't admit it. Sorry, he's over there. Well,
I would never admit to me having lunch.
It was a fantastic period, and there was a lot of banter, and it was very hard working. It was a good time.
Do you think that's changed? Do you think that ability to be fiercely competitive, want to destroy everybody in the week, but then get out to lunch and actually have a chat with your competitors? Do you think that's disappearing?
I think that was what I think that's what Peter changed actually. Up until then, which is fine. I think a lot of people would miss that. Funnily enough, I was talking to Michael Stoop yesterday, and he's given us a recording for our sort of My Property Stories series, and he was talking about his early days when he started in 1976, and he was talking about how in those days, as an agent, you could wander into another agent's office. Walk into their filing cabinet, look at their properties, and if you had a buy, you could go and check. I can see Peter look shaking his head. It was sort of that much more gentlemanly, and it was and fees were higher. I mean, Peter certainly didn't do anything to stop fees. They went, he was very good at getting the fees up, but it was a different era. Now it's much more Foxtons. Indeed, when Peter and I go out and see people, sometimes on behalf of Foxtons, almost everyone we go and see who runs businesses these days used to work for Peter at some point or another.
So what was it about? So Ed, what was it about millionaire property guru Peter Rawlings that attracted you to working with him?
Harsh.
But actually, I have to say, I think that's quite mean, obviously. But,
really harsh.
By the way.
Hold on, I've had enough of this.
Well, you lasted longer than I thought.
I'm joking.
You lasted longer than he thought as well.
David, you've muted yourself.
Sorry, I've
embarrassment, no doubt.
It's that moment where they realise that they're not on the Andrew Mars show and that they're on the big breakfast with Zig and Zag. It's that sinking feeling that they get.
Oh, dear.
Don't worry. We both.
Can I say something? Just
going
back to what Ed was talking about, which is absolutely true. I mean, in those days, we in South Kensington Foxtons had roughly 350 instructions. So it was so different, I can't tell you. And in terms of the gentlemanly bit of it, the internal language of Foxtons, probably now as well, I don't know, but it certainly was there, was EA. So if it was under offer EA, that stood for enemy agent. So that was our mindset, and it really was. And Ed, quite literally, and no exaggeration, was the only person I had lunch with, because frankly, the whole culture of the business was that the competition was the enemy, and if you got close to them, you'd get sort of infected with their way of doing business. And we were so different. I can't tell you how brutal is one word, and innovative is another. We were in changing things and not being the part of the old boys network.
Peter, was that 1985 though, when it first started?
I joined in '85, but this was more like '87, '8, that sort of stuff.
And that's
before the '89.
That's full on sort of Wolf of Wall Street era type stuff, and where everybody was just all macho.
Yeah. It's probably my favourite film ever, because I see so. It wasn't as bad as that, but I see so many similarities in what we did in winding people up and driving teams forward and making them make outgoing phone calls. And, I mean, let's face it, when you have 350 instructions, you can't sod around with doing stuff slowly. You have to absolutely, the volume and energy of what you had to do was immense because of the business you had. And now, most agents now have, 20, 30, 50 instructions if they're lucky. But those days were very, very different.
So I think what's interesting there is we're going to hear an expose admission from you that you did in fact hire and throw a dwarf. Is that right?
No, I did not.
Come on, you can now. It's been ages now. I bet all the clauses in your contract have expired now. You can give us the full unfettered story.
I didn't have a contract.
So, I mean, famously, obviously, that, and you always wanted a distance, obviously, whilst being very respectful of your Foxtons time. But your time at Marsh and Parsons, you deliberately went out and softened the image, didn't you?
Yeah, well, it was a brand established in 1856. It wasn't a new Larry brand. That Foxtons was, and that's the whole point of Foxtons, to change things. No, but I firmly believed and believe still that there is a middle market, and there's not many people in it now even, but at the time there was very, very few people in it. Not the crusty old lot fuddy-duddy at the top, who are much less fuddy-duddy now, and not the Larry Gits at the bottom, who I would at the time have suggested Foxtons was one, and I won't mention any names, but there are a few others. And I'm not denigrating those at all, because they are at a stage in the market, and they're aggressive and they're pushy and they're punchy, and they don't want the posh stuff. What they want is volume. And what I wanted at Marsh & Parsons was that volume in the middle. So our average sale price was, many of your people will find this incredible, but in London was about 850, which in London is, it's middle market, frankly. And so I wanted some of that market and volume market. And I wanted a little bit of class, but some aggression, because what people want from estate agents is results. They don't necessarily want to like them. It helps if you like them, but they want is results. And Foxtons is living proof of that. No one likes Foxtons, but everyone uses them at the time.
But I remember having a conversation, which I have, as usual, trotted out a million times since. But we had a conversation where I think you'd won at Marsh & Parsons your 3rd Sunday Times Customer Service award. And, okay, I remember that you hadn't won the overall one there, but you said to me, apart from that big one, the customer service one was the most important, because you made the point that there's 1,000 people, 1,000 great agents in this room, and they are all doing the numbers. But what the vast majority of them you felt couldn't also say was that their clients on the other side of the transaction felt that it was a positive experience. And you felt that if you were doing that at Marsh & Parsons, that put you into a very a particular niche, didn't it?
Absolutely, and that was one of the reasons I used to form the culture of Marsh & Parsons. Is that at the lower end you might like the results, but you'll hate the experience. At the upper end, you're not quite sure about the result, but they're lovely, charming people. But in the middle, and where I wanted to be, you loved the result, and the people were great too. Now that's a really compelling business proposition, I felt, in a market that most agents weren't delivering that.
And Ed, when he went from Foxtons, were you relieved, or did you think that's him now out of my hair at Foxtons, or did you think actually that's a bit worrying because you saw what he could, or was there no idea that he could make what he did ultimately do at Marsh?
Yeah, that'll be the one.
I don't think anyone thought he was going to. I don't think anyone thought he was going to turn Marsh & Parsons into Foxtons too. And at the time, there was plenty of cake for everybody. It was a big market. There were a lot more volumes transacted. There was a lot more volume. So it didn't bother me particularly. I thought it was a very good move. Part of our lunches over the years had showed very clearly that the ex-owner of Foxtons, who I won't name, is clearly someone who was a tough old boot, and he wasn't going to give anything away. So clearly, if Peter wanted to do what he's done now, which is turn himself into the millionaire Peter Rollings, he clearly had to go and do it for himself. So I was all for it. I thought it was fantastic. Marsh & Parsons was clearly I think it was described as a sleepy heritage company. And it very much competed in the same market we did, so we were very happy to take it head on. What Marsh & Parsons did have was a presence in a market which was I think Peter described it quite well. It had the sort of crusties looking at the top end of the market, and in that sort of Notting Hill, that sort of area, which has always been a fantastic area, I have to say. And I think he did a very good job of it, I have to say. I mean, at Foxtons we would have been nervous, particularly with a company like Marsh & Parsons, that suddenly had been a bit sleepy and hadn't been much competition. Suddenly it was competition.
I think just interestingly for right now, what's happening right now, what we did at Marsh & Parsons was we took over a business that was, as Ed said, was crusty and fuddy-duddy and a sleepy old brand, but it was sleepy because of the people. And we bought the business with 7 offices and 56 people. And within 6 months, we had about 10 left. You have to change the people. The people is what it's all about. And now what's going on with COVID, and there's all sorts of shit going on, and no, it's not fun for anyone. But what it does give you as a business owner is to clear the decks, and it gives you pretty much a free hit. I was speaking to someone yesterday, and he was telling me almost the first thing he did was get rid of 7 people. And he knew he had to do it. But nothing had made him do it.
You'd go straight. You'd ignore the furloughing part. Then you just go straight to kicking them out.
Literally, it wasn't called Pistol Pete for nothing. I mean,
you have to make tough decisions to make a great business, and I wouldn't have ignored the furlough bit. No, absolutely not. I wouldn't. But I would have had in my mind these guys aren't coming back.
Yeah. Okay.
Let the taxpayer pay them for the next 7, 8, 10, 12, 15 weeks. But they ain't coming back, because I know in my heart of hearts they're wrong for my business.
So Ed mentioned the Pistol Pete moniker there, which I've always particularly liked. And obviously you were well known for your, it was perceived as slightly brutal sometimes, coming into the office in your famous Mac, I believe. And if the Mac was on, the sacking Mac, as I think it was called, you but well, I want to get to the bottom of that, because actually again, when on the face of it, yes, you were known as obviously being quite tough there, but you did also, we've spoken in the past, and well, obviously you truly believed it for the business, but when you explained to me, you were talking about that it just wasn't right for the person as well, and that was one of the most fundamental issues, was if the person wasn't hitting their figures normally, it was because they weren't right for either the company or the industry per se. So why cock around and spend your time in a business like that when you're doing it? And that there really was a bit of an epiphany for me, where that is, well, explains why I'm not a reaper anymore, but ignoring that one, that is true, isn't it, Peter? That was what you believed, was it?
I did, and I still do. No one fires people who you think are going to be good. You give them time, but there are so many people. And I was hiring, bloody hell, I was probably hiring 40 or 50 people a month. We had a massive, it was too much, really. But so I was hiring a lot of the people.
Burnt them out as well, Peter. These people worked really so hard, they were burnt out, surely.
Yeah, but in many businesses, even now, I mean, in one of my son's businesses, he's in recruitment, they worked them really hard for a while. And the ones that can cope, can hack it, rise through that, have got the grit, got the determination, got the guts to move on beyond that, and then they go on. So, in many companies, even today, there is that brutalizing, that beasting, if you call it,
and is that necessary? Today,
I think so. Well, depends what sort of company you want. Foxtons at the time was a brutally hard sales company. Wolf of Wall Street. It was like that. We expected enormous amounts from people.
It's important, David, to melt the snowflakes these days, isn't it?
I love that. So just on that, is the story about True? Then it was a story of old that you once with somebody to if they gave you their shoes that you particularly liked, that you would hire them. Was that bullshit?
No, really.
Okay.
I used to tell people who were wearing brown shoes with dark suits they couldn't come and work. I also banned beards as well at the time. I couldn't get away with it these days, but I banned beards and I banned brown shoes with dark suits in London.
Oh, okay. So what are the stories that aren't true about you then?
Talking about dress sense and Foxtons, though, is quite something, isn't it? Because they did sort of change the image of the agent. The minis, the sharp suits. You could tell a Foxtons employee, and I mean, we all used
spiky hair.
Yeah, well, we all used to take the piss, and we used to try and differentiate ourselves. If you remember, Peter, we used to try and differentiate ourselves at D&G with unusual marketing.
Yeah,
and we used to
it was exceptional, wasn't it? I mean, you did do when Ivor was there. There was some really creative. I mean, there was the TV series for one, wasn't there? That I still think was absolutely exceptional, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think that possibly some people might have thought was a step too far, but it was a great flight of it was highly unusual. No one had ever done it before. But every year the planning and Ivor was absolutely brilliant at that. The idea, for him to be the front man with this differentiating marketing behind us. And I think that we had a very unusual image in the market, which was great fun, but sometimes it's quite difficult to parlay that into money. Whilst it's great for making people recognize what you do, they don't quite recognize sometimes necessarily what you do.
Yeah,
they think, well, they're a bit different and unusual.
Yeah. And that's true of awards as well. Is sometimes, on the face of it, they can be winning lots of awards, but that doesn't seem to be translating into actually into listing numbers, does it?
No, I mean, absolutely not. And I mean, these days, I think reviews are beginning to. Everybody's up for saying how many Trustpilot reviews, and they've got all this sort of stuff. It seems to be being discredited all the time. People don't necessarily understand about awards. I mean, we at Viewber have won some awards, so of course we put them on our websites and all that sort of thing. It's what you do, but the trouble is one of the things that's changed about estate agency is that it's become, and I'm not blaming Peter or Fox and this was always going to happen, but it did become all about the money. Whereas when I started back in the late 70s and 80s, this thing of wandering about, having a really good relationship with your fellow agents and all that sort of thing, it was very much a different feel. I suppose it was the same as the City, but it wasn't quite as bad as the City. The City pre-Big Bang was all about insider trading and lunches to tell between jobbers and brokers, telling each other what they were doing. That's a bit mean, and please don't sue me, anybody. But the agency world had to, I mean, the agency world did have to change, and technology and marketing did that.
Yeah. So, a bit of a loaded question. Do you think the standard of estate agency has improved since you guys stopped?
You go for that.
Well, no, actually, I do. I think the standard of estate agents these days is incredible. I think it's I think the best are very, very good, and as the same as it always was, the worst are very bad. And I think there's more choice in the market for people. I think marketing makes it very difficult for people. I think you've only got to look, for instance, at the Purple Bricks marketing. The idea that some people can seriously think they're not paying a commission to sell a property, and that is trumpeted, is a highly unusual but evidently relatively successful method of gaining customers. These days, they're to go from naught to the sort of third or fourth biggest estate agents in the UK in 5 years is quite something. So it's just a different technology enables different methodologies. I don't know, to hear what Peter thinks.
Well, I think I've always said I think our industry sadly doesn't attract the best people who could be in it. It is underpaid. It's under people aren't inspired, I don't think, to come into it. And it is. I love it. I think it's a fantastic business. Yeah. But I never forget my first boss. I worked for a company called Lane Fox in 1982 to 1985, and I was the only person in the department of 6 who hadn't been to Eton. So it was quite a posh company. But he said to me, and he was a very, very entertaining and brilliant estate agent called Mickey Wiggin. And he said to me, Peter, you can be great at this because 90% of the competition are completely useless. Now, I would probably say that isn't quite true, but I do think, I'm afraid, I do think it is 80% probably, and probably not completely useless, but undermotivated and just sort of want to drift through. And it's a lifestyle business, and there's nothing wrong with a lifestyle business, but it depends what you want. The counter side of that is if you are really good, you can be really good because the competition aren't very good. So you can really shine, which I would probably say, which is what I did at Foxtons and M&P. We shone because there was not a lot of great competition, in my view.
That's a really interesting one, isn't it? I've made the comment a few times. You see these people sweating away on the Dragon's Den, trying to come up with inventions, and just don't do that. Just find an industry that's being really poorly serviced at the moment and do it a bit better than the Joker's doing it at the moment. So I think,
but don't do it cheaper. Do it better.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's the key.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I don't disagree. And so. We spoke about online agents there. Would you have, your respective businesses, would you have had a specific strategy or policy for dealing with the online agents, or would you have just concentrated on what you did well?
We just carried on what we were doing, which was doing what we did well and being paid well for it. I mean, exactly as Peter just said, if you're going to do a job, do it well and get paid properly for it. There'll always be a niche, there'll always be a position for that. I do think that's becoming much more difficult though as time goes on. I think the trend that has been started by the boys in purple is going to be a difficult one to stem the flow of. And I think you're going to end up, I don't know where agency will end up. I suspect you'll end up with agencies more tech-based. But by the time my kids, who are 26, 27, now. By the time they're old enough to actually be lucky enough to start buying, this sort of tech or the methodology that they employ to want to use to buy something will be very different from what it is now. They're not going to want to bring somebody up, or it'll be a very different sort of methodology for with the tech involved. So I think that's going to be the biggest driver of change, is just the the demographic of the people actually of your customers. There'll be a menu-based choice of things people can pick, and if you want lots of things done and you haven't got the time, you'll pay for it, and if you haven't and you can do it cheaply, you'll do it cheaply. But a lot more will be done involving technology.
Forgive me for asking.
But they're still going to want to see it.
Sorry,
they're still going to want to see the property.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think
well, that's why there's this banner rolling along the bottom.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. We that's why I love, and this is a Viewber plug, but I was offered when I stepped back, I was offered loads of businesses to invest in and to come and advise, and the vast majority were lovely ideas. Yeah. Usually thought up by people who had a shitty experience buying or letting a house and thought, oh my God, we can do this so much better because of this. And yes, they probably could, but it would never make money and would never have mass market approval and use. And that's why I like this, because this is, you do have to view a property to buy, not necessarily to let. You have to view a property to buy it. 9.5 times out of 10, you will see it. Unless you're buying for pure investment, you'll see it. And as for tech goes, when agents learn how to use tech and actually don't have probably quite so many people, maybe, and then use companies like Viewber, and there are a few others doing other clever bits that enable them to work smarter. The viewing bit is essential and will always happen.
I assume that the getting together of you joining Viewber happened over one of these lunches. Would that be fair to say?
Blimey, I've forgotten.
I've slightly forgotten as well.
That's a great lunch. That's a great. Well, let's talk about Viewber for a second. So, for those that don't know how Viewber operates, typically, what's the profile of the person that works for Viewber?
The average age is 53. Majority, well over half are female. 60%, 65% now are ex-property. Only about 15% of the people that apply actually get through to the vetting. Get through the vetting process, and that's probably about it. The important thing is they're local to the properties they're showing, but that's the demographic.
And do they have to have worked in property before, or can they be sort of first timers?
No, they don't have to have worked in property before. I mean, the reason I came up with the idea originally for Viewber was at D&G we had 18 offices. We had a only Saturday, by the way, nothing on Sunday, a Saturday member of staff. And we just it was a bit of a nightmare. There was only one of them. The diary was full by Tuesdays. They were they were normally sort of school leavers. They were fairly unreliable. And there was a high turnover of them, so we had to keep sort of re-employing them. So that's why it started. That's why I came up with the idea, and then we floated it across a couple of people, and it worked. People thought, well, that's actually quite a good idea, and it's just gone on from there. So, I mean, it's a perfectly good question, David, and it's one that I'm sure a lot of people in the industry will ask. But it's and I don't think this is meant to be rude, but if you go and see any one of the sort of top 2 or 3 estate agents by image, if you go and see one of their properties, and particularly if it's outside London, you won't get one of their employees showing you. You'll get one of their sort of local viewing staff, and sort of local farmer's wife or whatever it is turning up. So it just gives everybody the opportunity to do exactly the same thing, but on a freelance pay-as-you-go basis. That's the best way.
Fair enough. Yep. And so in terms of a sort of safety level, who you are letting into your house and who you are trusting with the reputation of your business, how are you vetting those people?
Well, the first thing we do is interview them. So they get a video interview, and you can tell an enormous amount about someone from looking at them and the way they respond to questions. We do psychometric profiling so that we understand what they're good at, what their aptitude is for. We DBS check them, and we do.
So the DBS check is basically a certificate that says they haven't committed a crime yet. Well, they haven't been
positive
caught
thinking there, David.
yet.
Well done.
But it says they haven't committed a crime yet. Like the rest of us, you two
Yeah.
law-abiding citizens up there, I'm sure.
Come on, admit on live television or whatever it is.
But I suppose
I've never been formally cautioned by the police.
I suppose the difference, David, is that technology is advanced to the stage where lots of people have people that work for them like this. They have weekend staff, or they have viewing staff, or whatever it is. Technology's now got to the stage where it's possible to book those people on demand on a pay-as-you-go basis. So the ability for someone just to pop on, think, crikey, how the hell am I going to do that? There's a £4,000 fee. I don't want to miss it. Some people are increasingly giving these viewings to their staff members. One of the issues that Peter would have had at Foxtons is that you burn out your staff. And you're telling them to work. You're telling them to work every other Saturday and Sunday, and they're thinking they got families. They get older, they get better. Give some of those guys some Viewber viewings, and they can use those and have their weekends back and still earn commission. So there are different ways of using it.
And let's say I've got a viewing this Saturday. Today is Tuesday, and I need to get this service switched on. Can it be fairly quick? How quickly can we be onboarded?
Yes, it's instantaneous. We have a business development department like anybody else who are practiced. Actually, the technology now is such that actually the tutorials will take you down most of the route for what you need to do. And then if you've got any questions, there's the availability of a team to take you through it.
So we've covered obviously safety from the point of view of a house owner or an agent's perspective. What about them for the people that work for you as viewers? Because there has been some sort of there's been press, obviously well publicized, the Susie Lamplugh story. What steps do Viewber take to protect their staff that are going out there on their own with strangers?
Well, actually, I'm happy to say from Susie Lamplug's point of view, if any of you are working on your own, go to the Susie Lamplugh Trust webpage. It's a fantastic resource. So we encourage everybody to do that. We have code words for the telephone number they have to ring if there's a problem. I mean, it's exactly the same issues that you will face as a negotiator. The issue with most of our people is that they're a bit older, and B, they are local. What tends to happen sometimes with estate agents is you get young people coming in from a distance, commuting in. They don't know the area they're working in necessarily. The difference with Viewber is that the people will be very local and they're a bit older, a bit more responsible. So perhaps that helps, but Susie Lamplugh Trust page and code words with phone numbers really is the best way of doing that.
Simon, have you got any code words?
Asparagus.
Go. See,
Ed, has it evolved over time, your view of what Viewber was going to be and what it is now, or has it remained completely consistent?
No, it's remained pretty consistent. I mean, the what's evolved is the people who are going to use it. I mean, I've always been I thought that the industry, because I was running a company, left because I could see the hole in the industry. I think the problem, and I mean, again, this is not a criticism. It comes back to what Peter was saying a bit earlier about the standard of some people in the industry. For so long, the industry considers themselves the gatekeepers of property. So they've got the properties so the people will come. The problem is that as the average age of buyers and particularly tenants gets younger, they don't want to do it when, I always remember if someone rang me up and said, can I see that property on Saturday afternoon when I was a negotiator at Aylesford's or at Chesterton's, wherever I was earlier in my life, you would do your utmost to try and transfer that to a Tuesday afternoon viewing. You didn't want to have to waste a Saturday afternoon. People these days don't want to be told, no, you've got to do it. They want to say, no, I want to do it then. And if they can't do it then, they'll go on to the next property they see on Rightmove or whatever and go and see that and buy that or rent it. So the customer experience is changing. So what's evolved, Simon, in answer to your question, is not necessarily how I thought we'd do it. It's the people using it. What's been a revelation to us is we already represent 65% of the auction businesses in the UK doing their viewings. Obviously, the online sector, it's been very, very useful for them, but that's still a very, very small part of the market. I'm still staggered, really, by how slow the high street estate agency market has been to absorb. I think a lot of them would, and I don't know, David, maybe you have an opinion on this, but I think a lot of people think that I'm out for all their business. We're not. We're just there as a fill-in service. If you've got a really hot buyer who wants to sing on a Sunday and it's a £7,000 fee, and you can't do it, just ring up Viewber and get them to go and do it.
There have been moments where I have had 2 viewers out, and I've had 2 other members of staff doing viewings as well. So that's 4 of us all together, and the phones are still ringing. We've still got requests for viewings, and at that time I think we did actually speak to Viewber. I think we managed to sort out something at the last minute, but we would have used it, because I think if you do find yourself overrun, and I think the way that I think years ago the way it would have worked was if you would have called and said, "Look, can I see it on Saturday?" Somebody would have laughed at you and said, "You're calling on Tuesday to arrange a viewing for Saturday. You need to call at least 3 weeks in advance," or something ridiculous like that. And then we would then dictate to the prospective buyer when it was that it was suitable for us for them to see a property. I think the shift in customer service is that anybody that still runs a business like that isn't going to be around for much longer. And I think that you need to be seen to be offering what you can to the members of the public who aren't actually at this moment in time your paying client. Now
they will be, as you well know.
Will be. So if you can convert them into a raving fan, then you could be. We're getting some questions in here. Chris Holroyd, why should an agent use Viewber rather than employ somebody for less money to do the same job? I really like the idea, but I'd still be inclined to pay somebody on a regular basis and make them part of the team. Very interesting prospect. And we have started seeing asset management groups use the service.
Yeah. Well, that's a completely fair question. And it's probably the single biggest answer I get when I go to people to say, how about it? And, it's pleasing to see that some people like, I don't know, Simon Bradbury, Thomas Morris, guys like that use us as we're meant to, just occasionally. And yes, you can go and hire a school leaver for £10-15 an hour who'll do it, or you can get local people and you can hire them. That's fine. Absolutely, you can go and do that. The issue is what happens if you get very, very busy Saturday mornings. You get peaks. And also people tend to look at the Viewber experience and say, well, why would I pay £25-30 for a viewing? But the point is, you pay, for instance, £40 for an hour's open house in a property. You can get 5 or 6, 7 or 8 people around during that time. You can do, for 30 minutes you can get 2 or 3 people round. So it doesn't have to cost all that money if you use it sensibly. Open houses aren't used that often here. So I completely get Chris's point. If you want to go down that route and make them part of the team, absolutely fine. But we have done over 100,000 of these. So it clearly works. People don't have a problem with it. It's just a question of using that as your overflow. Maybe have your viewing staff and use Viewber as the overflow.
I think that's
there's a way through this in terms of in terms of estate agents. The absolute way through is what we did at Foxtons. To begin with, we opened 9 till 9, 7 days a week, because that's the way to do it, isn't it? Obviously, the problem is we hemorrhaged staff. The quality of staff was disastrous. So the whole point of this is to give I mentioned it earlier. The life of an estate agent is a tough old life, and it's long hours, and it's dealing with the general public. If you do it on Saturdays and Sundays as well, you don't last. You burn out, and we saw that. So this is all about what Viewber was about, is retaining your staff so that they are mentally prepared and up for it 75% of the time that they should be. The other 25% are taken up by Viewbers, evenings, weekends. 8 o'clock on a Friday evening. Who wants to do that? Now, as David was saying, you can convince that buyer to go at another time. But and in my old life, I'd have probably said you should definitely convince that buyer to go another time. But times have changed, and people are expecting more. And I think if us old-fashioned estate agents don't go with those times, we'll be dinosaurs.
Isn't it fair to say, though, that the Viewber proposition is the ignoring all the normal comments about the tragedy of the pandemic and everything else, but surely it's the perfect solution for these times, isn't it? Where people are, they're only just getting furloughed staff back there, as Peter said before. Many of those won't be returning with full the full employment and everything else. So now, in terms of testing that, and everyone's talking about restructuring businesses, to be able to see whether Viewber could be part of that. And I fundamentally have thought for some time, there are very few parts of the estate agency business, bar the market appraisal itself, that can't be outsourced. Whether you should outsource it or not is a different question. But you must have seen a spike, haven't you, Ed, in terms of the business bit at the moment with people inquiring?
Well, there are lots of yes is the answer to that, but there are lots of different interpretations of it. I mean, obviously, we've got some clients who have a local viewer as a key holder. So because the advice is you should have one person doing the viewings on a property. So you have a local viewer holding the key, and that one person does the viewings on it. Clearly for a lot of businesses, as you said, who have staff on furlough or who may not come back, which is really tragic. But the fact is, you can fill in the gaps with a viewer here and there. Yeah. And, it's no coincidence that we've done deals with companies like MRI, the software company. There's an introductory deal that Rightmove are putting on their property hub for us. These companies wouldn't be suggesting that companies who are stretched aren't going to need help, couldn't benefit from using Viewber. The CV19, however tragic a lot of it is, it has opened a lot of people's eyes. I'm amazed, actually, we can talk about this separately, but I'm amazed how slow some agents are really being to sort of come out of this. I suppose they're still in that slightly dangerous, they don't want to be seen to be going too far or behaving unsafe. I don't know, David, how you're finding with your business.
So I was just talking about this today. When it was announced we were all going back to work, I think that was Wednesday evening. And then some further guidance came out the Thursday morning. We decided that we weren't going back till Monday because we wanted everything absolutely right in terms of the safety for the staff and all the PPE and all the perspex screens and everything else that we've got in place. So we made a series of announcements to the public just to manage their expectations in terms of what we were doing to keep them safe, what we'd be doing to keep us safe, how we would look. Because let's face it, it's a bit weird now when an estate agent turns up at your house looking like an amateur surgeon. We didn't want any medical malpractice suits, all that sort of stuff. So we had to prepare for it a little bit. But we came back on that Monday, and now this is our 4th week back in. And some of my competitors have still either got one branch shut or they're not open at all. They're operating from home. And the comment is, yes, you can work from home, but the public need to see you front and center to get that sense of confidence back. I've had people that were knocking on the door here, and obviously there's a sign on it that says, look, you can't come in this office now. It's only by appointment. So we just opened the door a little bit and we said, yes, what would you like? And he said, nothing. I don't want to come in. I just want to let you know, I walk past here with my dog every day. I've been walking past for the past 8-10 weeks, however long, and it's very depressing because all the shutters have been down, and it's so nice to see you guys back at work because to me that is the first sign of normality returning. So, those kind of things are important, and I think that if agents are not being seen to be out there and doing things again, first of all, your public will forget about you. Secondly, you can be as cautious as you like. It's very clear we have been sent back. Whether you agree with that decision or not, the public, and that's the buyers and the sellers and the renters and whoever it is you talk to, they need you back. So get your ass out of bed.
That story would be better impressive if he said it. I'm a landlord with 14 properties.
I don't want to come in. I don't want to give you any business. I just want to say it's beautiful to see it. But
halfway through a conversation, so you just slam the door and say, "Thanks, mate. Got business."
Yeah.
But I think that is the message, and you're right. There are so many people that have not got out of it. There was this palpable sense of anger. And I remember that I had it for about 10 minutes after the announcement was made. We were shocked that we were being sent back. All of a sudden, I was sat at home, working in my underpants, doing 27 podcasts a day, drinking.
Peter.
No, get that out of my head.
Oh, come on, man. It's not that bad.
No, I know, but it's
the gentleman protesteth too much.
The old adage, David, isn't it? We've been talking about this quite a lot over the last few days. It takes, we know as salespeople, it takes 30 days to change a habit. We've had 80 days of this. So people are really changed. They really are changed. This is... I hate the expression new normal. I'm about to go on another webinar after this where I'm a panelist, which is about the new normal. But actually, however naff that expression sounds, that's exactly what this is, because people have got used to the way this is. The government, I don't think, quite sort of twigged that things that people would just get used to it. I mean, if you turn around to someone who's facing this lovely weather with 80% of pay and say, "Can you come back?" I mean, people are going to say, "Do I have to?" Why wouldn't you? I mean,
and that's just it. And I think even for I am a self-confessed workaholic. If I'm not doing here at the estate agency, I'm doing something. I'm always doing something. But the point is, you at some point you're right, that habit cycle changes. You get used to not having to be up at a certain time. You actually get used to having the things that you sometimes have to squeeze into your life. So exercise, a chance to spend time with your kids, or I'm sure that's something that wasn't encouraged at Foxtons.
No,
if you got pregnant at Foxtons, that was it. You were gone by lunch. Gone.
Even marriage was a problem.
So I think it's hard to get people back into it, but I think people just have to take the better bits of what they've been going through. They have to take has been tremendous learning opportunities over the past few weeks. I know you guys have done webinars. Simon is doing about 1 an hour at the moment on average. But the tremendous amount of free content out there, in reality, anybody returning to work now or at any point in the past few weeks, they should be better trained than ever before, because they've had a chance to relax.
Well, they should they should do, David. But the thing is, Pete, well, we've all got a few grey hairs. I mean, going back, there've been lots of black swan events that, crikey, when I started, the oil crisis was just coming to an end, and people had to get, we all saw what happened then. People bought different cars.
1960 something, 64.
But in the estate agency game, we've had recessions coming and going. We've had 9/11. We've had 08/09. We've had the .com bubble, all this sort of stuff. But nothing has ever been as concentrated and as universal as this. People have been in a situation for the last sort of 80 days or so where they haven't even had FOMO. There's been nothing else going on. They've had to just change the way. They've had no choice. They've had to change what they're doing. Whereas before, they've been pretty short, the events, then people get back to normal, whatever it is. I think this is one of those times when genuinely things will change. People have had to embrace different ways of doing things. And I think that I just hope that a lot of the companies learn from them. Exactly as you were saying, David, there's plenty to sort of learn from. I just hope people learn those lessons. And I would like to think that a lot of the high street out there that, for instance, have looked at what we do at Viewber, and we'll think, well, actually, we've got problems. We don't want to have 5 offices covering this area. Why not have 3 offices and use Viewber to cover some of the other areas? Whatever it is, use tech to try and change the way you work and do it more efficiently while still providing a better service.
Ed, I was listening to one of your podcasts. What happened to Ed Talks?
Well, they're still going. It's just in this environment. Sometimes, I mean, the last one I did was with dear old Henry, which wasn't really an Ed Talks one, but it was we recorded it over Skype. And the problem is I haven't had the time, to be honest with you, to sort out the way you guys do it here at Kerfuffle.
Forgive me for asking, but do you only interview posh people? It's something our listeners at home will be wondering. Listen, I've already had texts in, and from one guy, "Hi Josh, if you're still watching, how posh is Ed Mead?" Very is the answer.
Okay, I don't believe that for 1 second. Okay, I've interviewed all sorts of people.
I caught one.
Go there. I've interviewed people with some extraordinary accents.
So I caught the one. I caught the one that you did with well-known man of the people, Phil Spencer, and in there actually was interesting because you were saying that you would love to be able to market B2C, so basically to turn around to people that can't get a viewing with their estate agent. And say, look, your estate agent should be using View, but they would have no excuse other than to get you through the door. But unfortunately, all the marketing you have to do is B2B, and that sort of cuts out that. Do you ever think there'll be a moment where services like Rightmove decide to stop being B2B and go straight B2C?
I don't think so. I think that's highly unlikely. They've got, when your EBITDA is the way theirs is, it's hardly likely they're going to risk that. I think there is a chance that some of the other businesses, I mean, it's no coincidence that Zoopla were sort of forced into a slightly different methodology for how they operate by the on-the-market situation and people leaving them, and they've broadened their base of services they provide much more effectively. I'm not for 1 second saying that I know something that anybody else doesn't, but it would be more likely that one of them would do it. But it's no coincidence that the only outfit out there that spent the money on the B2C market, which was Purple Bricks, did what they did in terms of,
100%.
So it does work, but it requires an enormous budget.
So going back to Purple Bricks, earlier in the show, I was having some connection issues, so I missed the first half of everything you were saying, and forgive me if it's already been covered. But you've seen the news this morning that Michael Bruce has set up a foundation together with other leading industry figures for the good of and for the welfare of agents in general, both in terms of I think body, spirit, soul, mind. They were looking at a holistic approach to support agents, support the industry, raise standards, and basically try and correct everything that Michael Bruce has spent millions of pounds doing over the years in creating the monster that's Purple Bricks. Is that not just the definition of irony? And does it prove that the estate agency industry has the biggest sense of humor?
That's very cynical. It's very cynical.
Peter, they're not commenting. They're not commenting. This is
Peter. Listen. Once you get past the comments about Michael and Kenny Bruce and whatever people in the industry think about them, they've done what they've done. But if you look at a lot of the other figures involved, Michael Day, Sarah Edmondson, Chris Watkin, all these guys, that Peter Brodnicki, they're a good bunch of people, and they've got the right, their heart. They really are a good bunch.
They've got Sam, haven't they, for Moneypenny as well? So I think it's and look, ultimately, if you're putting £1 million into something that ostensibly on the face of it is, whether it's a mentoring program or David, I know you're taking the mickey a little bit, but you've been talking about the mental well-being point.
I'm always taking the mickey, and I'll be honest with you. I got a phone call last week from Stephen Brown, who's also one of the founder members of this thing, together with Michael Day and everybody else. And he said to me, "Look, just a heads up, this is going to be happening." And I was taken aback, and I said to him, "Look, I think this is great because it's needed." And I asked particularly whether they would be looking at the mental health side of things, because as much as people need mentoring, as Peter will know from we talked about burnout today, this is one of those industries where, whether you like it or not, it is extremely hard on the individual. We are hard on ourselves. We are constantly in a sort of a very paranoid headspace where we're constantly looking at what competition's doing and trying to keep up with them. And I think that takes its toll mentally, does it not?
Absolutely. Yeah, it does.
Well,
I don't see why anyone's being snotty about this. I mean, I came from an industry, a business, Foxtons, that totally changed the way our estate agency was done. When we were 9 till 9, the others were 9 till 5 and didn't open Saturday or Sunday. What the Bruce brothers have done is, whether you like it or not, is absolutely extraordinary, to create a countrywide brand, the only one in the country, in my view, in such a short period of time. It's not about what the competition are about. It's about what they want to do with the industry. I think it's a crazy idea. I don't think it'll ever make money, but that's as may be. But then to sell out, to make a lot of money, good luck to them, well done. And then to give £1 million back into a business that is going to help the industry, I think you can be too cynical in life. I think they've done okay. Good for them.
They didn't have to do it, did they? Ultimately, at the end of the day, go off in the. So look, I'm very conscious, Ed. You've got to go jump off onto the other panel show. But I just wanted to ask just one final question. If you were to look at any business in the industry now, and you were forced back into it, the pair of you, which business would you like to take on?
Well, talking for me personally, it would have to be back in London. I mean, I'd love to get back involved actually with I mean, I'm still a shareholder on the board of Douglas and Gordon. I think it's interestingly the CEO that took over there was another one of Peter's ex acolytes. Very very gung ho, successful young guy, James Evans.
He's a fantastic character, isn't he? He's
absolutely fantastic. I mean, he's had some terrible things to deal with. I mean, the timing couldn't have been worse, really, for the poor guy. But as London has been a very central London anyway, has been a very difficult place to operate. And I was very lucky when I was running central London for a long running central London, running the office
in your dreams.
It was absolutely fantastic.
After 5 pints, you say that.
I'm king of London, man.
I used to use a different sort of fuel in the early days, but that's a different story. The only competition I used to have was people like Peter, so it was easy.
Right.
So that's what I'd like to do. That's what I'd like to do. Is I would like to go back to where I was. I think. I mean, it's like anything else, isn't it? How many times in life have you said, "I wish I could go back to being 20 and know what I know now"? I mean, what wouldn't you be able to achieve?
I would have married the first one.
Same degree of luck.
You. I wouldn't want to go back in now. I've absolutely had enough. But there are I wouldn't want to go back in as a chief exec. Let's say that it's running a business sucks the life out of you. It just does. And I'm very, very, very happy with what I'm doing now. But I'm really enjoying advising a few businesses, and I think there are a few businesses, only a very few in central London, and it would have to be central London for me, what I know, that I think could be very exciting.
Okay, cool. And famously, you've got a love of fast cars, so I guess you've got all those first edition Toyota Priuses to look after as well.
I have, yeah, because they're so lovely and beautiful.
Big fan of hybrids, yeah. Okay,
not so much.
I know you've got another one, Peter. It's lovely to catch up with you, ever looking as wonderfully coiffured as normal. David, I know you've got a job to do, so it's only me that needs to go.
I have, but I'm just not sure I'm on Peter Rowling's Christmas list now. I hope you don't take offence at my little dig at Purple Bricks. Part of my job on this show is to be obnoxious and belligerent.
David, let me tell you now.
It's very rare I take offence. I'm friends with Simon Whale, for Christ's sake. How can I possibly take offence in anything?
You'd know about this. So one of the things you wouldn't know, David, is that Peter Fenwick, my old sales manager, christened the Peter Rowling's brush off, which was when Peter would walk into a room and clearly a lot of people would want to talk to him. He would do the fantastic, almost the bit of royalty where he would deign to talk to you. And then when he'd had enough of his time, he would leave you standing there. But you would, he'd do it in such a way that you weren't put out. It's like, I got to speak to Peter. And then he'd move on. He'd work the room like that.
Yeah, well, there you are, Peter. This is your cue just to press.
Go on, Peter. Just walk out.
Yeah, just walk out.
That's it.
How do I switch this off? See you later, Jen. Thanks for coming on.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.